Out in the wild where storms roll in without warning, survival is a daily choice, not a TV edit. Alaskan Bush People built its legend on that edge. And so did the family at its heart. But off camera, the stakes got higher. Fans still ask the hardest questions. Who did we lose? Who ended up behind bars? We separate rumor from record, honoring the loss that reshaped the show, and laying out the legal realities that headlines blurred. This story is about real people, so we'll keep it direct, careful, and sourced to publicly reported facts. As of late 2024, there's one confirmed death among principal cast, family patriarch Billy Brown. Several legal issues occurred over the years, including charges related to Alaska's permanent fund dividend and a more recent arrest. We'll explain what actually happened, what didn't, and where things stand, because in jail can mean many things, and often didn't mean what headlines suggested really. Alaskan Bush People follows the Brown family's attempt to carve a homestead life in extreme conditions, first in Alaska, and later in the lower 48. Viewers tuned in for self-reliance, family grit, and the romance of remoteness. What kept people invested, though, was the human story, a tight-knit clan pushing through sickness, disputes, and the weight of attention. That spotlight magnifies everything, celebrations and mistakes alike, and it's where rumor can outrun reality unless we slow and trace the record. Here's the list you came for, and we'll unpack each point with care. 1. The cast member who died, Billy Brown, remembered by fans and family, whose passing in 2021 changed the series forever. 2. Legal trouble that involved jail terms via electronic monitoring, Billy Brown and Joshua Bam Brown in a permanent fund dividend case. 3. An arrest that made headlines, Solomon Bear Brown in 2022. 4. Reports that swirl around others, will mark rumor versus outcome. Billy Brown's death is the heaviest answer in that list, and it deserves respect before anything else. In February 2021, Billy suffered a seizure at the family's property and passed away, a moment the series acknowledged with grief and remembrance. For viewers, he was an anchor, the storyteller, the stubborn dreamer, the father whose vision shaped the brand. Off-screen, he was a husband and dad, whose loss reset the family's center of gravity in a single night. That loss changed the stories the show could tell. It reframed conflicts, softened edges, and pressed every Brown to re-evaluate purpose in the wake of absence. Fans noticed an undercurrent of tribute in later episodes, a quieter reverence tucked between repairs, relocations, and those stubborn attempts to keep building. The point isn't to relive the pain, but to place everything that followed in context. When people ask who died, they're asking how the family rebuilt around that empty chair. Next comes the most misunderstood category: jail. Headlines love that word. But in legal realities there's arrest, charge, plea, sentence, custody, probation, and electronic monitoring, each with different implications. In the permanent fund dividend case, Billy and Joshua Bam Brown took plea deals to misdemeanor charges. Reports indicated 30-day terms administered through electronic monitoring rather than traditional jail cells, along with restitution and conditions. It matters, because the question isn't only who went to jail, it's what actually happened. Then there's Bear Brown's 2022 arrest in Washington state, which sparked another wave of speculation. He pleaded not guilty, and as is the case with many first reports, social media amplified worst-case interpretations before outcomes were clear. The responsible way to address it is simple: acknowledge the arrest, avoid inventing motives, and note that, as of late 2024, there was no public record of him being incarcerated long-term. Families deserve accuracy, even when tension and headlines collide. Viewers ask about Matt Brown, whose struggles with addiction were documented, and whose exit from the show left a vacuum. Rehab stays, recovery work, and life away from filming create a different kind of headline. The kind that unfolds quietly. Matt's story matters, but it doesn't fit in a jail box. As of that time frame, there was no public record of incarceration. Reducing complex recoveries to clicky labels isn't fairness, it's noise we can leave behind for good. So here's our compact promise before we dig deeper into each thread. We'll honor Billy Brown's life with clarity, outline the permanent fund dividend case without drama, and cover Bear's arrest using only what the record shows. We'll note who isn't in jail, why headlines stretched, and how grief and scrutiny changed the Browns' on-screen world. If you came for certainty, you'll get it, delivered with care for people and respect for the truth that keeps communities honest always. Before we talk about charges and headlines, we have to sit with the loss that recalibrated everything. Billy Brown wasn't only the patriarch, he was the show's pace setter, the storyteller who turned weather, wood smoke and stubbornness into a code you could feel. Early seasons built that identity around Browntown in Alaska. Fallen trees hauled by hand, cabins stitched together in storms, a family speaking their own language because they had to. You can debate what reality TV heightens or compresses, but you can't fake the way a family revolves around a single voice. Billy's voice set the compass. When it went quiet, the space he left behind wasn't just emotional, it was structural. Scenes that once defaulted to his decisiveness suddenly pivoted to silence, glances, and a different kind of patience, waiting to see who would pick up the center and carry it forward. In February 2021, following a seizure at the family's property, Billy passed away. The series didn't rush past it. Instead, it paused in testimonials, in shared footage, in the unguarded moments where a family tries to name the size of an absence. Viewers saw the Browns move through shock into the practical realities that grief forces on homesteaders: winterizing, maintenance, and paperwork, all while the person who usually handled decisions was gone. Fans responded with condolences and memories of their own, which says something about why the show resonated in the first place. People saw their fathers and grandfathers in Billy, imperfect men who could be stubborn but built things that lasted, at least long enough to give a family a shot at the next season. Television rarely allows time to breathe. Those episodes did, and the audience breathed with them. After that, every storyline changed tone. Amy's steadiness became both presence and pressure. Joshua Bam stepped into logistics with a firmer hand. Bear wrestled with identity in public and in private, a difficult task for any son whose life has been edited into arcs. Gabe leaned into labor and humor, Noah into planning and design, the sisters into caretaking and the quiet resilience that families often depend on more than they mention. None of that replaces a patriarch. It redistributes gravity. You could hear it in the way arguments slowed, in the pauses before decisions, in small gestures, someone checking a brace twice, someone else standing a little longer at a threshold. Grief is not a single wave in a finale. It is weather that lingers and teaches everyone to rebuild differently. That's why clarity matters when we bring up jail. The word lands like a hammer, but the reality in this story is more specific. Years before Billy's death, Alaska's Permanent Fund Dividend Program triggered an investigation into whether members of the family claimed resident benefits during periods when they weren't legally eligible. The case led to plea agreements for Billy and Joshua Bam Brown on misdemeanor counts. Sentences included restitution and short custodial terms administered through electronic monitoring rather than traditional cells. What does that mean in real life? Electronic monitoring is a structured confinement. You're restricted to a residence or approved movements, wearing a device that enforces the court's rules. It is still punishment and accountability, but it is not the image conjured by tabloid headlines. This distinction doesn't minimize the mistake. It simply tells the truth about what the law required and how it was carried out. Bear's 2022 arrest in Washington state created another wave of confusion. Early headlines rarely extend the same attention to outcomes that they lavish on the first shock, so rumors calcify into permanent assumptions. He pleaded not guilty, and as of late 2024, there was no public record of long-term incarceration. Due process is not a slogan here, it is the baseline for fairness, especially when a family lives under a camera. The responsible lens is to acknowledge what is public, avoid filling in blanks with speculation, and note that stories evolve over time. Viewers deserve updates, not exaggerations. Families deserve room to solve problems without the rumor mill insisting on a verdict before a court ever does. If you track the arc across these years, loss, legal scrutiny, headlines that blur, what emerges isn't a scandal reel, but a map of how a public family adapts. In the next stretch, we'll trace the PFD case step by step, lay out who faced what, and then return to the question that keeps resurfacing: who is actually in jail? Who isn't, and why the difference matters when you tell the story of Alaskan Bush People. We'll also separate out rumors that attach themselves to other siblings, clarify what was formally alleged, and show how the family's on-screen choices evolved under that pressure. Let us walk the Permanent Fund dividend case forward, like a trail in snow, step by step, so every footprint is visible. Alaska's PFD is a benefit paid to eligible residents. and eligibility hinges on where you truly live and for how long you're away. In 2015, state investigators reviewed applications connected to members of the Brown family and alleged that residency claims didn't meet the rules for certain years. The state filed multiple counts. The headlines were loud, the details technical. In 2016, Billy Brown and Joshua Brown accepted plea agreements to misdemeanor charges tied to those applications. As part of the deal, they agreed to pay restitution, complete conditions set by the court, and serve 30 days under electronic monitoring, structured confinement that limits movement and enforces compliance, rather than traditional jail time. Reports also referenced probationary terms. That is the legal core. A mistake acknowledged, a sentence carried out, restitution made, and supervision completed. For viewers trying to translate that into plain language, imagine a tight perimeter around daily life. Electronic monitoring is not a vacation. You check in, you stay within set boundaries, you live with the awareness that an electronic tether is tracking every step and time window, and violations bring consequences. Yet, it is different from the image of bars and bunks that in jail suggests. Accuracy matters because it changes how we understand accountability. The Browns did not escape punishment. The punishment simply took a different legally recognized form. That same precision applies to Bear Brown's 2022 arrest in Washington. Early reports covered a domestic incident and a single count, followed by a not guilty plea and standard pre-trial conditions. A flood of commentary filled the gaps with speculation. The record as of late 2024 did not show long-term incarceration. In any case involving families and relationships, there are usually protective orders, hearings, and outcomes that deserve careful language. If you respect due process, you repeat only what is filed or confirmed, and you leave space for people to change, reconcile, or move on. What about Matt Brown? His departure from the show and his recovery journey drew intense attention, but not because he was in jail. Rehab stays were public. Allegations reported by some outlets were reviewed, and no publicly available records show criminal charges filed that led to incarceration. He rebuilt quietly, sharing progress with followers online and focusing on sobriety. It is tempting for rumor to rope every difficult chapter into a single narrative of crime and punishment. Here the honest answer is simpler. Recovery is not a headline, and accountability can exist without handcuffs. Other family members, Gabe, Noah, Bird, and Rain, have not been the subject of verified charge-based stories that ended in jail time. Amy Brown's story, meanwhile, centered on serious illness and resilience, not criminal allegations. The confusion comes from the way a franchise this visible accumulates whispers. Forums repeat them. Aggregators amplify them. Eventually the volume can feel like proof, but volume is not verification. And when you sort the noise from the record, the map becomes modest. One confirmed death, one monitored sentence tied to a benefits case, one arrest with no long-term incarceration, and several lives that simply changed under pressure. How did the show itself handle these realities? Sparingly. The series has always been built on self-reliant set pieces, builds, hunts, repairs, migrations. Legal matters rarely occupy that frame for long, partly because courtrooms don't translate well to frontier myth, and partly because real cases require privacy and care. Updates appeared through news outlets, official statements, and the occasional on-camera nod rather than plot-heavy arcs. That editorial choice preserves the escapist promise while acknowledging that the Browns live in both worlds, the one with snow on the roof, and the one with paperwork on the kitchen table. If you're asking then, who is in jail, the precise answer is short. Billy and Bam served court, ordered time through electronic monitoring as part of misdemeanor pleas in the PFD case. Bear was arrested in 2022 and pleaded not guilty. As of late 2024, there is no public record of a principal cast member serving a current jail or prison sentence. That framing lets you keep compassion and accountability in the same breath. People make mistakes, courts respond, families adjust, and life continues under a harsher spotlight than most of us will ever know. In the next section, we'll rewind to the early seasons and track how public scrutiny grew with each move, from Alaska's mythic isolation to the lower 48, and how that shift raised the odds that small missteps would become big headlines. We'll trace post-Billy turning points and define legal terms, so fans stay clear-eyed without losing heart and context. Rewind to those first winters, and you'll remember why the Browns captured attention. Browntown wasn't just a backdrop, it was a myth stitched from fog, diesel, and the stubborn rhythm of work. Builds looked improvised because they often were. Voices overlapped and decisions were made in the same breath as mistakes. Viewers argued about what was authentic and what was amplified for television, but the emotional core read real. A family setting its own clock. The frontier frame gave every scene higher stakes, so that a broken bolt became a crisis and a solved problem felt like a story worth telling. As the audience grew, so did scrutiny. Fame is a magnifying glass that also acts like a funhouse mirror. Basic logistics, permits, fuel, deliveries, became fodder for forums, convinced that any support disqualified the premise. Then life forced a pivot. After Amy's cancer fight, the family's base shifted south, and the series followed. The ground changed from permafrost to hillside, from skiff landings to ranch gates, from isolation to a property in Washington where neighbors, officials, and reporters could see more. That visibility created friction, more access, more assumptions, and more headlines ready to frame every move. Visibility isn't inherently bad, it's just different. In Alaska, the setting itself did the editing. In Washington, public records and proximity did. When a show is filming near towns, people post sightings, speculate about set pieces, and keep score on contradictions. That environment doesn't just test storylines, it tests personal boundaries too. Cast members who were used to being judged for a day's work suddenly found themselves judged for a moment taken out of context. Pair that with social media, and the feedback loop tightens. A rumor becomes a screenshot, the screenshot becomes a caption, and the caption becomes belief. Post Billy, the editorial tone softened a few shades. You could hear more quiet in the edits, more patience around grief, more attention to memory. That wasn't a retreat, it was a recalibration. The family dynamic had redistributed, and the storytelling followed. Where Billy once delivered declarative sentences, siblings stepped into deliberative ones. Where the score once pushed urgency, it now made room for contemplation. The production still built and fixed and fought storms, but the subtext was different: loss, responsibility, and the question of permanence. Audience loyalty didn't just survive that shift, it deepened. Because the topic is sensitive, let's translate the legal vocabulary that confuses headlines. Arrest means you're taken into custody on suspicion of a crime. Arraignment is the first court appearance where charges are formally read, and a plea is entered. Charges are allegations, not proof. Bail sets conditions for release before trial. Courts often issue protective or no contact orders in domestic-related cases. A plea can be not guilty, guilty, or no contest. A conviction is the formal finding of guilt after a plea or trial. Sentencing decides penalties, fines, restitution, community service, incarceration, probation, or electronic monitoring. Electronic monitoring deserves a plain definition. It is court-ordered confinement enforced by a device, usually paired with strict schedules and location limits. Violations send you back before a judge. Jail is short-term incarceration typically administered by counties. Prison is longer-term incarceration run by the state. A suspended sentence is a jail or prison term. A judge does not put into immediate effect, contingent on compliance. Probation is supervised freedom under conditions. Parole is supervised release after serving part of a prison term. These distinctions matter, because in jail often becomes shorthand for any punishment, when the truth is more granular. Applied to Alaskan Bush People, that granularity clears the fog. Billy and Bam's permanent fund dividend case resulted in misdemeanor pleas, restitution, and 30 days served through electronic monitoring, not iron bars. Bear's 2022 case produced an arrest, a not guilty plea, and public pre-trial steps. As of late 2024, there's no record of long-term incarceration. Matt's story is recovery-centered, not custody-centered. Others have lived normal, complicated lives without criminal headlines. When you see posts claiming multiple cast are in jail right now, ask for dates, docket numbers, and outcomes. If none appear, the claim is opinion dressed up as a fact. Still, the rumor vortex doesn't spin by itself. It feeds on curiosity. The antidote isn't to ignore hard chapters, but to frame them precisely. In the next section we'll map a concise timeline, loss, legal milestones, and key public updates, so fans can hold a reliable picture in mind whenever speculation returns. The Browns story works best when the human stakes sit beside the legal realities. That balance keeps compassion intact without surrendering clarity, and it lets the audience honor a family they've watched for years, without repeating errors that the internet made loud. Let's assemble a clear timeline, so the picture stays steady whenever rumors flare. The series premiered in 2014, introducing a tight family carving out a life far from paved roads. Early seasons built the show's frontier identity, while curiosity about logistics trailed every episode. In 2014 and 2015, Alaska officials reviewed permanent fund dividend filings tied to the family. Investigators argued that eligibility rules were violated during years when the Browns did not meet residency requirements. That process moved slowly, as most bureaucratic cases do, but it set in motion the legal story fans still reference today. By 2016, Billy Brown and Joshua Bam Brown agreed to misdemeanor pleas connected to those filings. Sentences included restitution, probationary terms, and 30 days served through electronic monitoring instead of traditional jail confinement. It mattered not because punishment disappeared, but because accountability took a different court-monitored form. When you hold that detail in mind, the shorthand question "who went to jail" becomes more precise. The law answered with fines, monitoring, and supervision, and the family adjusted and moved forward under the same cameras that documented builds and blizzards. In 2017, another storyline overtook everything: Ami Brown's serious illness. Production shifted around treatment, and the family relocated out of Alaska while she fought through care. Viewers saw a rare merging of the show's myth with the most ordinary human fear, and many stayed because vulnerability made the Browns more familiar, not less. By 2018, public updates spoke of remission and recovery. The family focused on building a new base in Washington, with the series reframing from isolated coastline to mountain acreage. That move also brought more scrutiny, because proximity to towns and records draws more eyes than Seafog ever did. The late 2010s also saw Matt Brown step away to focus on sobriety. Multiple rehab stays were public, and the story evolved mostly off-camera. He did not go to jail. Instead, he worked on recovery beyond the show's frame, and shared progress directly with followers. Fans who arrived looking for scandal often found a quieter, harder truth. Some battles are fought day by day without court dockets to narrate them. The cast continued to film, sometimes together, sometimes apart, as families do when life pulls at different angles. February 2021 marked the most profound turning point. Billy Brown died after a seizure at the family's property. The show paused, and the audience paused with it. On-screen tributes honored a father whose voice had defined the series' cadence. Off-screen, the family rearranged roles and responsibilities, a process that cannot be rushed. This is the moment that reshapes every other conversation, including the question of jail. Loss resets priorities, deepens empathy, and reminds viewers that the line between character and person is in reality no line at all. In 2022, Solomon Bear Brown was arrested in Washington state following a domestic incident. He pleaded not guilty, and public records as of late 2024 did not show long-term incarceration. Standard pre-trial steps, protective conditions, and hearings followed the familiar pattern of cases like this. Headlines amplified the initial shock. Outcomes received far fewer pixels. Responsible storytelling restores proportion, repeating only what filings or credible reports confirm, and leaving room for time to do its work. Families are not frozen in the worst frame of a single day. By 2023 and 2024, the show's rhythm stabilized into a post-Billy era, builds, repairs, seasons, and the quieter arcs of grief transforming into legacy. Legal stories became periodic footnotes rather than plots, while the Browns' public presence emphasized work, memory, and forward motion. Through it all, one summary remains accurate. One confirmed death among principal cast, misdemeanor pleas with electronic monitoring, rather than bars, an arrest without public evidence of long-term incarceration, and several lives navigating ordinary pressures under extraordinary attention. Keep this sequence in mind, and the noise recedes. When someone claims multiple cast members are in jail right now, ask for dates, charges, case numbers, and outcomes. Precision does not erase accountability. It frames it. In a world where attention rewards exaggeration, choosing clarity is a way to respect the people on screen and the audience watching. In the next section, we'll translate that clarity into guidance for viewers. How to fact-check fast, how to spot rumor patterns, and how to honor the human stakes while staying anchored to the record. We'll also underline what has not happened because absence is a fact too. There is no verified report of any principal cast member serving a jail or prison sentence as of late 2024. That snapshot can change with time, but snapshots should be dated. Accuracy is a moving target. Transparency is how you keep aim. So how do you keep your footing when the internet turns certainty into a sprint? Start by slowing the story down. Read the whole headline, then check the date. If it's older than you remembered, look for an update. Next, translate the verbs. Arrested is not convicted, charged is not jailed, and sentenced does not always mean bars. Outcomes live in court dockets, not in comment sections. When a claim says a cast member is in jail right now, ask 3 simple questions. Where, for what, and when? If the post can't name a county, a case number, and a current status, you're looking at heat, not light. After you ask, verify. Many states provide free online search portals for court records. County clerks maintain calendars and case summaries. Type the full legal name, try common variations, and filter by date range. Cross-reference with reputable local outlets, because small papers often track hearings more closely than national entertainment sites. When you find a case, read from the bottom up to see the most recent entry. Dismissed means the charge is gone. Deferred can mean conditions must be met before dismissal. A suspended sentence is not served unless there is a violation. Probation is supervision, not a cell. Electronic monitoring is confinement at a residence with strict limits. Now, step back and look for the rumor patterns that keep coming around like winter. A screenshot of a headline with the date cropped is a classic tell. Present tense language attached to a years-old event keeps old news feeling new. Sources say with no names attached usually means someone is quoting another video, not a filing. Watch for compilation clips that stitch separate incidents into a single narrative. The edits can make a week look like a year, and a claim look stronger than it is. The more a post pushes outrage without citing anything, the more it needs your patience, not your trust. The humane part matters too. These are real people managing grief, recovery, relationships, and work under a camera. Sharing graphic images for shock value does not add facts to a story, it only replays a painful moment. If you want to honor Billy Brown's memory, repeat what he built: steadiness, stubborn care, and the habit of fixing what you can reach. If you want to be fair to family members navigating legal stress, repeat what the record shows and nothing more. Empathy doesn't erase accountability, it keeps you from turning someone's worst day into entertainment. So to close the loop with the clarity you came for, here is the picture that holds as of late 2024. Who died? Billy Brown, the father and storyteller whose loss still shapes the family's decisions. Who was in jail? No principal cast member is currently reported as incarcerated. Billy and Joshua, Bam Brown accepted misdemeanor pleas in the permanent fund dividend case, and served 30 days through electronic monitoring, alongside restitution and supervision, a court-recognized form of custody that is not bars. Who was arrested? Solomon Bear Brown in 2022, followed by a not guilty plea and public pre-trial steps. There is no record of long-term incarceration tied to that case. What does that leave us with? A family who built a show on resilience and kept going through public storms that most households never face. The wilderness is one kind of danger, attention is another. Both demand the same skills: patience, precision, and a willingness to repair what breaks. If you carry those habits into the way you watch and share, you protect the story you love from becoming something it never was. You also make space for the Browns to grow in public without being trapped by rumors that outlived their facts. Before we fade out, keep one last practice in your pocket: date your certainty. When you talk about this family, add as of and the month and year. It turns opinion into a snapshot and invites updates instead of arguments. If new filings appear, we will recheck the map and adjust. If nothing changes, the calm you bring will matter more than volume. Share memories of Billy that meant something to you, not just headlines. Offer corrections kindly if you see mistakes, and when someone asks who died or who is in jail, give them the clean answer without the extra thorns. That is how you honor both truth and people. The Browns taught viewers how to build with what's at hand. We can do the same with information. Gather carefully, measure twice, and set each piece where it will hold in the weather. That way, the story stands, and everyone who loved it can keep walking into next seasons.